Welcome to Kinetic Humor, where we break down the science of your brain through these visual explainers so you can, actually put it to use. I'm your host, and today we're unpacking a psychological phenomenon that I personally find absolutely fascinating. And to be perfectly honest with you, it's a little bit uncomfortable. We're diving into the research behind the intelligence trap. It's a deep dive into the smart, stupid paradox, really exploring why the absolute sharpest minds among us are so often the ones who fall the hardest.
Okay, let's dive right into this. I want you to take just a second and think about the absolute smartest person you know. Maybe it's an old professor of yours, maybe it's a brilliant CEO, a top-tier doctor, or just that one friend who aced literally every single exam without even trying. Now, I want you to think about the dumbest, most catastrophic life decision you've ever watched that exact same person make. Maybe they stayed in a relationship that was obviously destroying them. Maybe they stubbornly defended a financial decision that was clearly bleeding them dry. Or maybe they fell for a narrative that frankly any child could see right through. And watching this unfold, you probably thought to yourself, how? Like literally how? How can someone with so much raw brain power, someone undeniably that smart, do something so shockingly stupid?
Well, here's the answer. And fair warning, it's probably going to make you squirm a bit, because statistically speaking, it applies to us too. We tend to think of intelligence as a shield, right? Like this cognitive defense mechanism against foolishness. But the uncomfortable truth is that intelligence does not protect you from stupidity. In fact, in a lot of cases, it makes it worse. Psychologists at places like Princeton, Yale, and Harvard have spent decades studying this exact paradox, and what they've found challenges pretty much everything we fundamentally believe about intelligence. High IQ individuals aren't just equally susceptible to cognitive biases as the rest of us. They're actually far more susceptible to a very specific category of mental errors. Why? Because your intelligence is the exact tool your brain uses to justify the shortcuts that lead you off a cliff. The smarter you are, the better you are at being confidently wrong, simply because you have the brain power to build an airtight argument for a completely flawed premise.
To really understand how this trap works, we need to break down the foundation of what we're actually talking about here. What most of us casually call intelligence is, in reality, a very narrow, highly specific set of cognitive skills. Think about it. When you sit down to take an IQ test, what's actually being measured? It basically boils down to pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, and working memory. It's your ability to mentally rotate a shape, hold a bunch of numbers in your head, or spot the next item in a sequence. But notice what is glaringly absent from that list. IQ tests do not measure real-world judgment. They completely miss your capacity to navigate complex, messy human situations. They don't measure your ability to manage emotional biases. And most importantly, they absolutely do not measure whether you have the self-awareness to recognize when your own thinking is just fundamentally broken. That lack of real-world judgment perfectly highlights why we really need to stop conflating intelligence with wisdom. Because scientifically speaking, they are completely separate systems. Wisdom, in this context, is defined as knowing the exact limits of your own processing power. Think of your brain like a high-performance sports car. Intelligence is the raw horsepower of the engine. Wisdom? That's the steering wheel, the brakes, and the mirrors. It's the self-awareness required to look at a situation, say a giant brick wall blocking your path, and realize that maybe, just maybe, ramming into it with maximum horsepower isn't the best solution. True wisdom means stepping back and recognizing that your initial lightning-fast thought process might be flawed. It's having the cognitive humility to stop, take a breath, and look for the keyhole instead of just trying to smash through the wall.
So, the crucial point here is that we have to separate these two concepts entirely in our minds. Think of them as two totally distinct pillars. On one side, you have raw processing power. That's your IQ. On the other, you have judgment and self-awareness. That's your wisdom. Having an immense amount of processing power absolutely does not guarantee you have sound judgment. In fact, if you have massive processing power but zero self-awareness, you're really just arriving at the wrong conclusion much faster and with way more force than the average person. You end up using that high IQ to quickly assemble this impenetrable fortress of rationalizations around a terrible idea. Because these are completely different mental systems, being a genius in one does absolutely nothing to guarantee you aren't a fool in the other.
Let's actually look at the data on this, because it's wild. University of Waterloo psychologist Igor Grossmann and his colleagues have researched this extensively. They argue that most standard intelligence tests completely fail to capture real-world decision-making, and Grossmann's findings are stark. A person can score in the absolute top 1% on an IQ test, meaning on paper they are a certified card-carrying genius, and yet they can still consistently make catastrophic, life-ruining choices. We see this top 1% cohort making absolutely baffling decisions in their marriages, sinking money into terrible investments, and alienating colleagues to the point of completely torching their own careers. Raw intelligence didn't save them. In many cases, it just gave them a better vocabulary to defend their disastrous choices to themselves and to everyone around them.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how the intelligence trap physically plays out in the brain. It's what we call the cognitive shortcut. When a highly intelligent person is faced with a problem, their brain goes to work with lightning-fast processing. It's incredibly smooth. And because of that raw speed, they arrive at a rapid, confident conclusion almost instantly. But here is the fatal flaw in the system. They reach that conclusion before the question has even been fully examined. They literally sprint right past all the warning signs. And if anyone dares to challenge them, well, step 3 kicks in: elaborate justification. Because they're smart, they have the mental gymnastics required to easily swat away valid criticisms and build this complex, highly convincing argument for why their rapid, flawed conclusion was actually right all along.
This leads us to a pretty cruel, undeniable irony of human psychology. High IQ individuals are often significantly less aware of their cognitive limits than people of average intelligence. Why? Simple. Because their rapid mental processing makes them feel incredibly confident. When your brain hands you an answer smoothly, frictionlessly, and instantly, it feels exactly like the truth. The complete lack of mental struggle tricks the brain into assuming total accuracy. But we have to remember this absolutely crucial equation. Confident does not equal correct. The feeling of knowing is just a biological sensation in your brain. It is not a measure of factual accuracy. Smart people fall into this trap every single day, completely blinded by the sheer speed of their own brilliant but unchecked deductions.
Now, this phenomenon perfectly ties into one of the most famous psychological studies of our time. Back in 1999, David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger published their foundational research on self-assessment. You've probably heard of it. It's famously known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. The popular everyday understanding of this research is that incompetent people lack the skills to realize how incompetent they are, which leads them to wildly overestimate their own abilities. We all know this version, right? We've all seen someone who is terribly unqualified acting like an absolute expert. But the research didn't stop there. While everyone focuses on the unskilled and unaware part, there is another deeply overlooked layer to this cognitive phenomenon, a layer that specifically targets the exact people who think they're completely immune to it.
Which brings us to our final, somewhat unsettling question. Are you smart enough to fall for the darker finding? You see, the Dunning-Kruger research, when combined with the intelligence trap, suggests something wild. While the incompetent overestimate their skills, the highly intelligent use their massive brain power to systematically blind themselves to their own blind spots. They trap themselves in a mirror of their own brilliant justifications. It's a darker finding because the very tool you rely on to solve problems, your intellect, is the exact mechanism digging the hole deeper. So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up today's explainer. The next time you feel absolutely, unshakably certain that you are the smartest person in the room with the most airtight argument, ask yourself, are you actually correct? Or is your brain just working fast enough to hide the rake you're about to step on?